Hi, I'm Greg Scott. Welcome to week 3, day 4 of my 4-week challenge I set out for myself to do a video every night, 5 nights a week for 4 weeks. As I said, we're on week 3, day 4. Tonight, I want to talk about why we should all wake up at 3 a.m. and worry about net neutrality, which I know sounds really weird and arcane, but hang in there with me. Back in 2014, almost 5 years ago, Netflix and Comcast got into this big argument when Netflix accused Comcast of throttling movie streaming after Netflix customers complained about poor movie performance. The movies kept pausing and buffering. Now think about the players here. We've got Netflix on one side of the internet, and we've got Comcast, and we've got consumers on the other side of the internet. We've got Comcast that controls the last mile between the internet core and consumers. Anybody that wants to watch them, if Netflix wants to send movies to consumers, the path to about 50-some% of the consumers runs through Comcast. That gives Comcast a whole lot of power by owning that last mile. And Comcast was throttling Netflix traffic. That whole controversy put net neutrality in the news. Movie streaming, that's what we care about. There's a whole bunch more to it than movie streaming, but movie streaming is what we see in our living rooms every night. So don't turn off when I talk about net neutrality. I know that's a lot of words and it sounds technical, but hang in there with me. This is a big deal and you need to care about it. Here's what's going on. And this is as old as the first antitrust hassle back when Teddy Roosevelt was president. And no, I wasn't alive when Teddy Roosevelt was president. I might be older than dirt, but I'm not that old. For people who think this stuff is only for tech weenies like me, just think again. This is billions in money, and all of it comes out of our pockets. Net neutrality means that internet service providers are supposed to treat all internet traffic equally, end to end. Internet service providers should be neutral carriers, and they should not make judgments about what's favorable or what's unfavorable traffic. Here's the issue. Without net neutrality, large ISPs with legal monopolies into your home, they have the right to mess with your traffic. They can control access to services you might care about. What happens when any monopoly player offers their own competing service? Forget high tech for a minute. I know that's weird. Forget high tech. Let's say Alice runs a restaurant, and yes, we're gonna eat at Alice's restaurant. I'm gonna work that in. Alice runs a restaurant, but Bob controls all the streets in town. Charlie wants to eat, wait for it, here it comes. Charlie wants to eat at Alice's restaurant. But to get there, Charlie has to travel over Bob's street. Now what happens if Bob's sister, Doris, let's say, let's call her direct, but we'll just call her Doris. What happens if Bob's sister, Doris, opens a restaurant that competes with Alice? Bob wants to make sure money stays in the family, right? So Bob sets up toll booths all around his travelers. Travel on Bob's streets, you pay a toll. Bob controls all the streets in town. So if you want to go from one side of town to the other, you pay a toll. But anyone that eats at Doris's restaurant, they get a refund on their tolls on the back end, courtesy of Bob, because Bob's a nice guy, right? Well, of course, that puts Alice at a competitive disadvantage. Sooner or later, Alice eventually closes because she can't compete because Doris has this huge price advantage. Before long, Bob's got all the streets in town, and now Bob controls all the restaurants in town. That's kind of how antitrust works. That's the idea. Now, back to high tech. Today's large telecom companies offer bundles that include phone service, internet service, cable TV, and premium stuff like movies on demand. These companies control both distribution and content. Distribution, the wires that lead into your house. Content, the stuff that travels over those wires. They control many of the streets and some of the restaurants. They want to control all the streets and all the restaurants, so they're going to encourage you to eat at their restaurants, keeping with my metaphor. If any single ISP becomes your only choice to connect to the internet, that ISP controls access to services you might care about, and they can exercise that control with pricing and surcharge gimmicks, just like the antitrust monopolies from 100 and some years ago. But today's ISPs have even more powerful tools. They can prioritize traffic or they can play other quality of service games to treat traffic badly they don't want to carry. Here's a biggie. Caps on wireless services. We all like to look at content on our cell phones these days, right? How many people do we see walking down the street with their nose like this? Excuse my cough. Well, guess what? AT&T bought DirecTV a little while ago. So if you're an AT&T wireless customer, you don't have a cap if you watch movies from DirecTV, but you do have a cap for content that comes from Netflix or from Hulu or pick your movie service. If you watch DirecTV, no caps, no problem. If you watch any other competitor, you do have caps and you do have a problem. That's an antitrust thing right there. Amazon, Netflix, Hulu, Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, all those services at their core, they're just elaborate. They're elaborate websites. The path from your house or business to those services runs through the internet. Without net neutrality, ISPs can grant or deny or regulate or tax those access to those services any way they see fit. And if an ISP let's say an ISP decides it wants to offer retail services, let's say, what do you think that ISP will do to traffic that goes to Amazon? Now, it gets worse. Amazon's a good example, and so is Facebook. Those services have lots of clout today. So if an internet service provider wants to play with traffic to those services, lots of people will complain, and those services have enough power to stand on their own. But what if, say, some bald guy in Minnesota wearing an undershirt wants to make a video that makes AT&T mad? Well, AT&T has the path into a lot of people's cell phones. So AT&T could block my content to their cell phones, so nobody on the AT&T network could hear what I have to say. That's bad. I could complain. I could set up lawsuits. I might even win. 10 years and a few $1 million later, I could win the lawsuit. I'll be too poor to care by then. Well, guess what? The United States Federal Communications Commission killed net neutrality a couple years ago. And then here's my call to action. If open access to internet services is important to you, and it should be, then familiarize yourself with the details around this stuff and speak up. Your livelihood might depend on it. And thanks for putting up with me again tonight. And tomorrow night is Friday. We're going to talk about whether or not government should regulate social media. So come back to hang out with me later and next time, and we'll talk about that. Thank you.